Welcome to the Peak Mindset Show, guys. My name is Mathew Park, and our aim is to inspire people to wake up in actualizing their true potential through learning from the masters in life, athletics, and in business. She is the young Aussie inspiration. This young adventurer began her mountaineering journey at the young age of 8, trekking with her first challenge crossing the Kokoda Track in Papua New Guinea. She then trekked in Nepal, completed treks on the Everest Base Camp and the Kokoda numerous times. And Alyssa, you got to help me here, girl. Kosciuszko? Kosciuszko, does that make sense? Kosciuszko, I was so off. In Australia, the Aussie 10, the 10 highest peaks in Australia, Mount Kilimanjaro, which I think I got that right. After completing Mount Kilimanjaro in 2011, Alyssa began climbing by doing the mountaineering course in New Zealand and climbed in South America and Nepal as well. She was on Everest both in 2014 and 2015 when the avalanche and the Nepal earthquake occurred and closed the mountain. And just recently in 2016, she became the youngest mountaineer at 19 years old to climb the big peak of Mount Everest. She's now written her new book called The Girl Who Climbed Everest and has speaking engagements around the world and events as she prepares for her next big adventure, which we're curious to know what that's going to be on the show today. With great pleasure, I want to welcome to the show the young Aussie inspiration, Alyssa Azar.
Hey, how are you?
Great. Good to have you, Alyssa.
Thank you.
All the way from Australia.
Yes.
So right now, we're learning about the time difference here, and I believe it's like 15 hours ahead where you are.
Yeah, so it's about 10:15 at night at the moment. Yeah.
So 10:15 for you, and it's like 7:25 for me or something like that. So yeah, in the morning. So we got a big little gap going on here. Awesome, Melissa. Tell us more about your story. Like right now, you're 20 years old. You turned 20 in November, and so tell us a bit more about your in-depth in what really inspired you to go into this journey of mountaineering and all this nature stuff you're doing.
Yeah, so I started out trekking just locally. I grew up in a small town here in Australia, and my dad was a trekking guide. He still is, and often on weekends we'd just go out bushwalking. He was preparing clients to take away on trips, and it was kind of my favorite thing to do is every weekend I'd be out bushwalking with them. And not long after that, I sort of got the itch to go on some of these trips myself, and sort of harassed my dad for a couple of years. And one day he actually came back from a trip when I was about 7, and he said, all right, if you really want to go, then I'll give you the opportunity. But it was he actually said to me, I'm going to give you a year-long training program, and if you miss a session or you don't work hard enough, you won't go. And that really put in that work ethic straight away, I think, because I was so desperate to go to Kokoda, which is in Papua New Guinea, and that really kicked off the love for adventure that I had. So I was really hooked on it from then on, and every couple of years we'd go somewhere else. So 2 years after Kokoda, it was Everest Base Camp, and then the Aussie 10 peaks, and Everest was always sort of this dream I'd had in the back of my mind. I'd always wanted to get into climbing, but didn't know anything about it. So after years of trekking, I was about 14 when I decided, you know what, I'm going to go for it and set the goal of Everest, and then, started making it happen, really.
So your dad gave you a kind of like this 1-year challenge.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think it's funny, he admitted later, he was like, it was sort of a way for you to realize how hard it was and to possibly quit if you didn't really want to do it. But it worked. You know, I sort of got that little opportunity and really, really wanted it. So stuck that training plan out for a year, and in the end he had to take me because I'd finished it. So
tell us, what's one day of this program? I got to know.
Yeah, so mostly it was weekends of bushwalking. So we'd get a pack on and go out for 4 to 6 hours on Saturday, and then on Sunday again to sort of build up endurance. And then most afternoons after school, throughout the week, just a session in the gym at night. That was kind of my whole life during that period was training, which I actually really enjoyed. So
interesting. And then like when you started doing that trekking stuff, like what age was it when you decided, I want to climb Mount Everest?
Well, I think it first popped into my head when I was 8 and I was actually on the Kokoda track. We were like 3 days in and I don't know where it came from, but I actually said to my dad, like, have you ever climbed Everest? And he said, no, I haven't. And I said, would you ever climb it? And I can't even remember the full conversation, but it was definitely in my head from then. And yeah, a few years later started thinking about it again. And so, yeah, it was sort of there throughout all of the trekking period. And then, yeah, later on decided to really go for it.
Interesting. So 8 years old?
Yes.
Wow, you are a trooper. This is impressive. Not sure what they have in Aussie land there and they eat over there, but man, I want some of that. That's interesting. So, are you also doing weight training as well?
Yeah, yeah. So weight training in the gym as well as like body weight training. My dad also owned a boxing gym at the time, so it was fitness and boxing and all these different sorts of forms of training. So yeah, that's what I would do throughout the week, and then the pack training on the weekends.
Wow, interesting. So now you're 20. So now, like, do you obviously you must have, you're an adventurer. You're the kind of girl that probably goes for these big, adventurous feats. So what is next? Do you know?
Kind of. I mean, I've sort of spent some time working that out, obviously since Everest. But yeah, I was so tunnel vision on that for so long that I hadn't really thought about it. But now my next trip is actually off to Russia in June to climb one of the 7 summits. It's Mount Elbrus, so it's the highest over there. And hopefully, yeah, South America later this year to climb another one of the 7 summits. So, but ultimately, there's some really big climbs still in the Himalaya that I'd love to do that'll be really, really challenging. So.
Wow. So when you climbed, were you climbing with a team or were you alone or how did that work?
So you're sort of with a team, but ultimately you are climbing alone, particularly on Everest. So you're in a team because you use a logistics company, and so you'll share base camp. I had like 12 other climbers on my expedition, and yeah, so you're living in base camp together. You're sharing the camps on the mountain together, and you work together a little bit, but ultimately, yeah, you sort of climb to your own rhythm and how you acclimatize, and you're on sort of a different schedule to everyone as well.
Interesting. So now, from that experience to now, I want to learn what psychology did you have to actually prepare yourself for to do this journey and mentally prepare yourself for something like that?
Yeah, so when I got back from Kilimanjaro, which was in 2011, that's when I really decided I'm going to go for Everest. I'm going to set this goal, but I really didn't know where do I start. It's going to be a long process. So I really broke it down. I went, okay, I've got to go and do this climbing course in New Zealand, and that'll give me the skills to then climb on other mountains and gain experience. But on top of that is the day-to-day, yeah, physical and mental training. So a lot of my physical training was pretty similar to what I'd done in the past, just a lot harder now, and I'd add a few things in. So a lot of the pack training, but this time on a daily basis. In the gym again, running, a lot of endurance cardio training with gas masks and things to get ready for the altitude as well, get my body used to that feeling. But I think the mental side of it is what gets you to the summit, when your body's had enough. And so I had to try and experience that, back at home in Australia before Everest if I could. So I do like different training camps with a few special forces guys who'd kind of push me to the limit and then see, how badly I wanted it and kind of, gain that mental edge before Everest. So that was another part of my training as well.
But what actually motivated you to go through and pull through everything?
I think it was just, Everest to me represented the pinnacle of this thing that I love to do in a way, and particularly at the time. It's something that I'd sort of idolized in a way since I was 8. And from Kokoda, it was always like, if I could do anything in this particular industry, it would be Everest. And it just seemed like, the ultimate dream to me. So I think that's what it was. And from day one, I was fully committed to it. So I think I was willing to see through all of the training and the mental side of it as well, yeah.
So when you're with these special forces kind of guys, and they're like, just making you work on all angles, like from a mental standpoint, did you ever feel like you wanted to quit?
I definitely hit the wall a few times, but I never seriously thought, okay, I'm out, I'm not going to do this. So I think, and that's what they were trying to see was like, how badly do you really want this when you're absolutely pushed to the limit, because that's how you'll feel on the mountain. And so I never seriously wanted to quit, but they definitely pushed me pretty hard, and that's good to test how bad you want it before you go, I think.
That's powerful. So what was your big why? Like when you think about Mount Everest, like, the average person, they're like, that's incredible. That's an insane feat. So for you, it's like, it was like your goal. That was your intention, right? So what was
Yeah.
your why behind why you wanted to pick Mount Everest in a means to push you through all those mental blocks, those mental barriers, the special forces, you name it, to make you achieve that goal?
Yeah, well, I think, I'd sort of seen myself, I guess, wanting to become a mountaineer. And like I said, it sort of represented almost the best version I could be of myself, I think would be a good way to put it. And something I've always said is it's not just about standing on the summit, it's who you have to become in order to be able to do that. Who I was at 15 when I started preparing versus now through all of those experiences is completely different. And I think, who you have to become is important. And I think that's kind of what drew me to Everest, is I knew going through that process was going to make me who I really wanted to be, and finally getting to that summit. So I think that was really powerful for me to overcome all of those obstacles and sort of prove to myself that I was who I thought I was, and able to do what I'd always wanted to do. So yeah, it was really motivating.
That is fantastic. Now, I got a question that might you be like, really, that kind of a question? So, in fact, I actually made a post in one of my coaching groups about you coming on the show. And I said, hey, guys, what kind of questions do you have for Alyssa? And this is one of my guys who I've known for quite a while. And he had a really good question. Do I ask her or not? So here's the question.
Yep.
When you're climbing this peak, you hear stories about people who obviously didn't make it successful, right? And maybe they unfortunately didn't make it and they're left, right? Did you actually come across stuff like that when you actually went up there?
Yes, particularly not lower on the mountain. Once you leave the final camp, which is Camp 4, you're above 8,000 meters. That's the death zone. So yes, there are bodies up there and can't be recovered from those altitudes. So yes.
So, okay, and I don't want to go into the deep stuff, but for example, when you're going up that mountain peak and stuff like that comes up, are you so focused that you're still aligned that's like, you know what, no matter what, I'm gonna find my way to get to the peak and get back down and make this happen?
Yeah, I think so. I'd experienced that once before on another peak that I was training for prior to Everest. So it wasn't entirely new, and you expect to see it up there. You know that that's going to be the case. But yeah, I think when you're leaving Camp 4, okay, we're on a time limit. And so I was so focused on making sure that I stayed right mentally, that, hopefully the altitude wasn't getting to me too much. And I was so focused on what I needed to do that, I think that you just kind of go into your own little world a little bit and just focus on each step in front of you.
So you're a pretty good speaker. You can talk well.
Thank you. Yeah, I've done a bit of speaking since I've been back. So
I'm like, this girl can make it happen. So where did the speaking talent come from? Is that natural or what?
No, definitely not. It's funny. I'm actually pretty introverted as a rule, so you wouldn't pick it when I do interviews and stuff. But I think I've just been used to it over time, particularly since being back from Everest. So just get used to it.
That's interesting. So you never really had this skill before? You just kind of had to hone it out, or what?
Yeah, exactly. Particularly with the process of Everest. Even before I went, I started doing a little bit of speaking and working with sponsors and that. So I think just over the years, But most days I'm actually pretty introverted, so it's funny.
So, okay, so here's something that might make you think a little bit here. So when it comes to something you haven't shared before on an interview or a speaking engagement or anything, even in your book, what's one thing you haven't shared before you could share with us now that I really want to know?
I can't think of anything in particular off my head. I think, a lot of it's somewhat real, but still there's a lot of raw emotion, I think, on the mountain that you don't necessarily, share with people. So I'm sure there's something, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
So here, okay, maybe this will kind of draw something out. So when you're on that, like, I'm going to call it past that, you said the death zone, I guess you call it. What is going on in your head compared to, like, is that sun obviously kind of puts a subliminal picture in your mind thinking, oh, the death zone, okay, this is the next level here. What are you thinking?
Yes. Yeah, I remember when I was leaving Camp 4, it's very mixed feelings because on one hand, I felt a lot stronger than I expected to at that altitude. Even though you do feel it, I still felt very coherent, very clear mentally, which I didn't really expect at that altitude. So that was a good thing. But also, there's that incredible nervousness of like, this is the point of no return. If something happens up here, I have to be able to get myself down. Otherwise I'm in trouble. And yeah, so that all sort of plays on your mind constantly, and really just focused on, I really want this, and I'm not willing to just quit on it. So yeah, just went with it, and actually really had a great climb that night, and felt really strong. And I remember sort of getting to the final summit ridge that last hour, and it was just the most surreal feeling. So yeah, it's very mixed emotions on summit day.
What do you tell yourself when you're climbing the mountain? Do you have like a mental ritual you're telling yourself, phrases in your head to keep you really going?
Yeah, kind of. So even in base camp, I sometimes just have a small notebook of just sayings or quotes that I've heard that I find that really motivate me. And yeah, I find just reading that before you go up for the next rotation on the mountain is really motivating. But even when I'm climbing, it's just small things. When you hit the wall, I'll say, all right, you got this. And I sort of reflect on all my training, and I go, yeah, I can handle this. And even something as simple as that just helps me to keep pushing on. So
interesting. And now, as far as your book is concerned, you've obviously launched your book, right, last year?
Yes.
Okay. So what's the vision with the book, and like, where do you see yourself? Like, are you looking to do like a mass marketing campaign, like beyond what you've already been doing already? What's sort of your vision with everything with that?
Yeah, so the book, it took a few years, and it's been great since it's come out, so that's been pretty cool. But yeah, looking at a few different options, but also around not just myself, but sort of the goal is to empower young women, and just starting basic with here in Australia is sort of because that's something that I can relate to, I guess, throughout my adventures. And yeah, so I've had a lot of young girls reach out to me as well since Everest. So there's a few different projects that I'm working on to try and get into that, and maybe even some children's books involved. So there's definitely a few different avenues that I'm working on. So.
Interesting. Any other things you do, like as far as rituals that help you maybe stay calm or stay focused? I want to know your techniques that you're using or have used in the past that you use to keep yourself in that checked zone or in that focused zone.
You mean when climbing specifically, or
climbing,
just in
morning
general?
routines right now in general? Like, are you doing like meditation techniques? Are you doing visualizations? Or what are you doing to help you keep in that zone?
Yeah, I definitely do a lot of visualization, and have for years, but never really thought of it as that. And it's only recently I realized that that's something I've been doing for years. But yeah, I'll just, even first thing in the morning or right before I go to bed, sometimes put your music in, and just sort of visualize, and even without music right before bed. And I think it's natural particularly when you're prepping to climb Everest, you do think about all the possible situations that you're going to be in on the mountain, good and bad, and try and imagine the feeling of climbing and getting to Camp 2 and Camp 3. And, I did that for years prior to Everest just naturally because, it's this huge thing coming up. So visualization is a big one. And even morning routine. When I was prepping for Everest, and even now, the first thing I like to do in the morning is I'll get up, usually just have like a hot drink, a healthy drink, and then go and do my training session. So I know that that's the first thing I've done in the morning. It's the top priority, and then that sort of helps set the tone for the rest of the day as well.
What's your personal life like right now? Like, did you have a personal life when you were like climbing or not?
Not really, no. That kind of took over everything. So when I did have time off just training or anything, it would just be hang out at home. Sometimes I'd go and see, my siblings and hang out with them, but that was pretty much it. It was, mostly training.
So what's it like right now? Is it more of a personal life right now?
Yeah, it's a bit more relaxed, has been for the last couple of months since I've been back. So yeah, it's been good, but just starting to really get back into my training now. But yeah, I've had plenty of time to relax. So
you're probably the person that wants to get back in the game and like get this going.
Yeah,
eh?
It doesn't take long. Yeah, once I'm recovered, I like to get back into it.
That's awesome. So what's your weight training like in the gym? Like, do you lift heavy and more endurance? Are you like lifting like weights? Like, what exactly are you doing in the gym?
Yeah, so I'm just about to start a new program now, actually, for the next climb, but it'll be mostly endurance, a lot of running as well. I do a bit of boxing, just as sort of cross training. But yeah, I've always done weight training, but also calisthenics, so it's a whole mix. When I started prepping for Everest, I needed to put on weight. So I did a lot of deadlifts, squats, trying to build strength in my legs, and then dumbbells as well. So a whole range of different things. But at the moment, it's more endurance and cardio based. So. Okay,
endurance and cardio. Do you enjoy going to the gym?
What's that?
Do you enjoy going to the gym?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, it's just it's sort of part of my routine that I'm used to, and I quite enjoy it. Yeah.
So, what's one thing beyond mountain climbing that you really enjoy doing?
Um, I've always enjoyed any kind of sport. I did a little bit of boxing when I was younger, so that's kind of if I'm not climbing, that's usually what I'm into. Yeah, but other than that, I just read a lot. I like I'm definitely a homebody. I'll hang out at home and just either go see my family if I'm not training, or yeah, I do a lot of reading, but that's it.
Okay, cool. I got the peak five for you, Alyssa. So the peak five questions basically are going to be questions I'm going to ask you. You're going to give me, a short answer towards them. And
Yep.
here are the peak five for you. The first question I have for you is, do you have a mentor or someone of influence in your life right now?
Yes. So it would be hard to pick someone in particular right now, but I'd say it's probably a top three. That'd either be my dad or a guy named Keith Fennell, who's ex-SAS. He actually was one of the guys who kind of mentored me throughout the process of Everest. So yeah, probably the two biggest ones.
Excellent. You said XSIS?
Yes,
What does that mean?
Australian SAS.
Oh, okay.
Special Air Service Regiment. Yeah, so I'm sort of a friend through our adventures and trekking and that, and yeah, sort of throughout the process of Everest, I'd occasionally go down and train with him, and we'd work on the mental side. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Number two, what's your most influential book, not favorite book, the most influential book you've read that's made a difference in your life?
I think it would have to be a book called Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield that I actually had with me on Everest that started reading right before it. I just found it really. I think I started reading it probably 10 weeks out when I was in the final preparation stage of Everest, and it just really helped give me that mental edge of what it really takes to be successful at whatever it is you want to do. So
It's called Turning Pro.
yes, Stephen
I'm
Pressfield.
going to make a note here, and it's Turning Pro. That sounds really interesting. A good book. Okay, number three. What is your most influential quote you've ever had in your life? The one maybe that you used in Mount Everest that was like your motivator to get you to the top.
I think I had a whole book of quotes, but it would probably narrow down to two that were the most consistent. So one would be the famous Sir Edmund Hillary quote, which is, it's not the mountain we conquer, but ourselves. I always really liked that one. And same sort of concept of it's not just about the summit, it's who you have to become to get there.
Wow.
And then also a favorite quote that I've had for years is not really a quote, but more a poem. It's the Invictus poem that I've always sort of carried with me on mountains. So yeah, that's what I think about as well.
That's awesome. Wow. Excellent. Now, this next question, you're going to laugh. I'm going to tell you the question, but then I'm going to
Yeah.
reframe the question for you. If
Okay.
you could tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would that be? So if obviously you are 20, so
Yes.
so I'm going to ask you this. If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing,
Okay.
what would that be?
I think I would tell myself probably just to go for it, and that sounds really simple. But I think I just had no idea. I mean, I actually first saw Everest when I was 10. I went and did Everest Base Camp then, and I don't think I realized how influential that place or even the mountain was going to be, and didn't really know that that was going to be a real goal within the next few years. But yeah, probably just go for it. Don't hold yourself back, and yeah, I'm really glad I followed the path that I did.
I love it. This next question is, if you could contribute one thing in the world with no limits of any limitations of any kind, what would your contribution be in the world?
It's a hard one. Yeah, actually, sort of what I'm aligned with doing now. I think my goal is seeing what I can do in empowering young people, young women in particular, young girls. It's sort of some of the projects that I'm working on. Yeah, I think that would be my goal because I see a lot of young girls who are in a similar position to what I was, and who probably limit themselves and are limited more than they should be. So yeah, that's definitely where I see myself trying to make an impact.
That's awesome. I'm going to go back to the old question before that you didn't have an answer
Yeah.
for. Okay, so if there's one thing you could share on this show that you've never shared before, what would it be? Maybe your brain's been working in the past 10 minutes.
I honestly have no idea what I wouldn't have shared at this point, but yeah.
Is there a story like on the mountain that you can say to everybody that was like a story that's very personal, or maybe like a moment that you can share?
Yeah, I think there might have been a couple. So I think on the summit ridge, when I was like probably an hour away from actually summiting that final section, I had a few different thoughts. One is I remember thinking like if my family could see where I was right now, I don't think they'd believe it, or if they had any idea. And I think then actually getting to the summit. There's sort of this is probably something I haven't shared with people is as much as I've done interviews and that there's sort of when you get to the summit you feel like it's just a moment for you and the mountain and I just felt really it's almost peaceful in a way. It's just you and the mountain, and that's just a moment that no one can take away from you, and I found that quite special. So I think that'd probably be the one thing I haven't shared with people about, particularly about the climb.
Interesting. So a moment with the mountain, like what does that make you feel when you say that?
Yeah, I think it's just, even with all the chaos and all the things that can go wrong on the mountain and the intensity of summit day, there's that one moment that's almost still for a second and it's just you and the mountain. And I think that makes everything that you've gone through worth it. It's a pretty special moment.
Like when you're at the top and you're looking down, like I'm trying to envision this in my head because I know I saw a movie one time, but it's like that's a movie, right? So like when you're at the
Yeah.
top, like what do you feel at the top of that mountain peak?
Yeah, it's crazy, and when you first get there, there's almost this moment of like disbelief because I'd visualized it in my head so many times, and then you're actually standing there, and it's just the most amazing feeling. But the view, you're standing so far above the clouds, you're just looking down on them, and you can see some of the biggest mountains in the world just surrounding you, and you can see out for a mile. So yeah, it's pretty hard to describe, but it's just amazing.
Unreal. So when you're at the top and you're all alone, by the way, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, like all on top of the
It
mountain.
was it was myself and then Sherpa with me, and we had just climbed together, and yeah, it was just us two.
Incredible. So when you're at the top doing your thing and looking around, like what thoughts going in your head though? Like beyond like are you like, well, I did this, or like, what's next for me, or gratitude, or
Yeah,
what is it?
definitely. It's definitely gratitude. There's this feeling of like excitement that you're on the summit, but also thankful that the opportunity was there, and particularly after the previous two seasons I'd had, you sort of question whether you'd ever be able to get climb to the summit. So finally getting there was just gratitude for the fact that it had happened. And I don't think you really process it fully until you get back down. You sort of get there and you have that moment, and then you've still got to be focused on what you're doing on the way back down. And there's still that thought in the back of your head of it's not quite over yet. You've got to get down to base camp. But yeah, you spend the whole climb down sort of processing, what just happened, and yeah, trying to wrap your head around it, I think.
When are you going to make your journey over to North America?
In November,
Oh, you
hopefully.
are.
That's
What part? Where are you going to come to? Like New York, LA? Where are you going to be going to? Do you know?
no, not sure yet. So
Okay.
yeah, still yeah, just focusing on Russia at the moment, and then plan for a few other
Well,
things.
if
So
you come to Eastern Canada, let me know because we'll do a live interview if you're here. Okay.
yeah, that'd be
So
great.
definitely make it happen. But definitely if you come to North America, us Canadians, we like Aussie people. I've heard that because
Oh,
you were referred it from a friend of mine in Australia.
oh, really?
And I said, if
Okay.
there was one person I could interview in Australia that would be the most inspiring person, she's like, she got back to me in like 5 seconds. She's like, she's an old friend from a buddy of mine who they're together over in Kelowna. And
Yeah.
said Alyssa, and I'm like awesome. So I look at all your stuff, and I'm like, you just totally blew me away. So I like messaged you right away, and I'm like, I got to get you on our show. This is amazing because I interview a lot of entrepreneurs, pro athletes, CFL, NFL players, hockey
Yeah.
players on their psychology, and I'm like, I've never interviewed somebody who's actually been like in your endeavor before. And it's cool because the psychology is a little similar to like, a pro NFL player or like a pro,
Yeah. Yeah.
entrepreneur who's making, millions of dollars a year, or someone who's done something, in a professional sport or martial art. And what you're doing, it's kind of like there's some similarities, and I like your book you referred to about turning pro. So I'm actually going to read that book,
Yeah.
by the way. So
Yeah, it's a good one.
that's very cool. So I appreciate Alyssa sharing what you did, and it's your time for a late night Friday night. Instead of going out partying with your friends, you're hanging out with me in Canada.
Yeah, it's awesome. So happy to do
There
it.
you go. What else is there anything else you want to share, Alyssa, or where can we find you online?
Yeah, so online I have Facebook or Instagram or wherever you want to find me. Also a website, so just alyssaazar.com.au, and yeah, you can just search me on Facebook under Alyssa Azar as well. So
Where can we find your book?
Yeah, so book you can just order online. I think Booktopia and a few other places have it as well. So yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
Awesome. So stay online here, Alyssa. We have one more thing we're going to talk about offline. Okay. So, guys, I want
Yep.
to welcome Alyssa and thank Alyssa for being on the show today, all the way from Australia at 10. Well, now it's going to be almost 11 o'clock at night for you. So, all the way from 11 o'clock in Australia, Alyssa, was amazing to have a talk with you. So, thank you once again.
Thanks heaps for having me. It was great.
Anytime, Alyssa. Thanks so much.